Six protesters arrested after failing to block wealthy flyers from the East Hampton airport. So, six protesters were arrested outside the East Hampton airport on Monday after they blockaded the entrance to the tarmac and demanded that East End elites pay up. The group, part of New York Communities for Change, chanted, "Tax the rich," as passengers arrived to the airport in their luxury vehicles to take private jet and helicopter rides. Now, also the thing that's kind of like always weird about the whole tax the rich thing, the rich pay taxes, the rich pay a lot of taxes. But here's the thing, it all depends on how they actually make their money. Like, for example, you could have someone making like 500K per year in like income, like straight up income, because they own a business and they pay themselves a salary of like $500,000 a year. They pay taxes on that, right? They also pay taxes on employing, if they have employees, on their actual employees, right? They got to pay payroll taxes, they got to pay insurance, they got to pay potentially 401ks. Like, it gets very expensive. But the main thing is, what a lot of people don't understand is that typically the only people who don't really pay taxes, who are the uber wealthy, are people like billionaires, but they choose specifically when they do actually pay taxes. So, for example, let's say that you are like an owner of, let's just say, Facebook, right? We're just going to use that as an example, right? So you are a part owner of Facebook, right? But you take no income from Facebook, right? You're not an employee, you don't get paid dividends at all. The only thing that you have is stock that you own, okay? Kind of think of it like a house that you own, right? Well, if that house or the stock goes up and then you decide to sell it, you got to pay taxes on the stock that you sold, right? But if you never sell, you never got to pay taxes on it, but you also can't really use it. Now, some of these billionaires and also millionaires who do own like this stock kind of they kind of do like really weird deals with, basically, let's say, major banks, where they basically get margin or like loans against their equity in a company. So again, let's just say that you are an owner of Facebook. Let's say that you own $1 billion of Facebook stock, right? But you don't want to sell any of that stock, right? What you could do is like basically say like, hey, go to like any major bank, like, Wells Fargo, Chase, and Bank of America, whatever, right? Any bank, and be like, hey, I want $500 million in a loan at a very certain percentage that I don't gotta pay back for, like, well, I pay back, but like basically over the course of like, let's say, 10 years, right? Or longer, depending on how they set it up. So basically, you could be technically be in the red for the next 10 years because you took out a loan, right? So you're still able to live like you are making like 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 million per year, but it's all debt. It's all money that's not even yours, right? And you still own the equity stake of the company. You still own the $1 billion worth of like Facebook stock, right? And as long as you end up using that like 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 million per year that you're getting in terms of like fake income, in terms of like debt, you could technically turn that debt income into investments to basically get even more money coming in terms of like equity and all that kind of stuff, right? You see a lot of these like billionaires basically take debt against their equity stakes to basically go and invest into other companies or create companies to basically create another equity position, like more stock position in that company, and then just repeat the process over and over and over again. And you could basically have these billionaires pretty much never actually having to pay any taxes because they don't take any income at all. They're literally just basically going one bank to the other bank to the other bank, like perpetually funding their lifestyle and deals because they know that any one of these banks would be stupid not to give them their loan because they know that they would be able to just take ownership of the equity stake. Like that's the reason why so many banks would actually be willing to do that because they don't really ever lose in that situation. And again, even if a billionaire didn't go down that route, because that's basically the way that they could pretty much never pay taxes for the rest of their life. If you are an owner of, again, Facebook, right, and you get the $1 billion worth of stock, well, guess what? Depending on your living expenses, you could sell what, like $20 million worth of Facebook stock once, pay the taxes on it, and literally never have to take a dollar of income for the rest of your life and still live an amazing life, right? Like, think about it like that, right? Now, that would be the way that I would personally prefer to go. Like, take out like a really huge position, pay the taxes on it, and basically live my life and never have to worry about money ever again. That's the way that I would go about in doing it. Instead of doing like the whole weird finagling with banks about loans and equity and all that kind of stuff, right? Which is basically the way that Elon Musk kind of does it. But yeah, that's pretty much how uber rich individuals are able to basically get away with not really paying taxes. Let's see. Okay, sources told the Post the protest turned out to be a dud as no flights were canceled, with one noting the airport has a private entrance for the richest of the rich that the group wasn't blockading. Wow, so this whole protest was basically just a fail from the very beginning because they weren't even blocking a private entrance of the uber rich. Elise Hu, a climate campaigner with the group, said they targeted the airport as a part of a series of demonstrations to demand that the state's highest earners pay for affordable housing and climate change prevention. We are here to say, you guys broke it, you fix it, Hu told the Post. The thing is, that's not really being really 100% true because a lot of people affect the environment. Protesters held signs that said abolish billionaires and inequality kills. They are calling for Governor Kathy Hochul to impose higher taxes on New York's wealthiest and redistribute the funds to those in need. The only problem with this is that if you keep increasing the taxes on the wealthiest individuals in your state, guess what's going to happen? Eventually, they're going to be like, hey, screw this, I'm out of here, and then the whole infrastructure basically collapses because they're basically funding the whole infrastructure. So East Hampton police said 6 of the 2 dozen or so demonstrators were arrested for disorderly conduct, a violation that amounts to less than a misdemeanor. They stood in the road, refused to leave. They got arrested, and everybody went about their happy way. When it was all over, Officer Christopher Anderson said Monday afternoon. Now, here's the thing, right? The thing that I do like about this type of protest is that it's not violent. Like, you get their point, they have a voice, and they basically move on their way when everything's said and done. And nothing really actually ended up like happening, right? This is kind of like meh, right? like a meh situation, like a 50-50 situation, like, I don't really care too much about it one way or the other. It's a lot better situation than be like, oh my god, something happened, someone lost their life, someone got into a fight, now it's just getting like really crazy. Like this is basically the way that a protest should be, where it's peaceful for the most part. It was beyond a dud of a protest, a source connected to the airport told the Post, emphasizing that the demonstration was unrelated to the recent controversy over the privatization of the airport. It was a place to find wealthy people, the source said of the choice of location, adding cops took half an hour to show up. Another source who was at the scene told the Post that no billionaires were even affected because they have their own private entrance. The protest only affected the local workers and made their lives more difficult, the source said. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people who do these types of protests don't really think too much about, right? Like anytime you do a protest in, like, let's say like a McDonald's or a Burger King or a place of work or like a business area, guess what? There's employees there as well, right? That are working a job to take care of their family, to take care of themselves, to pay their bills. Maybe they just don't really care about anything political or social issues. Maybe they're just trying to survive. And a lot of times, a lot of the people who do these protests don't actually care about the negative effects that some of these protests will end up doing, which is sad to see. So still, the demonstration sparked some shouting matches, with one video showing a woman confronting a protester, claiming members of the group hadn't paid to park at the airport before they began to picket. That sounds more like a Karen. It's like, okay, so you're going to have a lady complain about you for not paying your ticket before you go protest? That seems kind of weird. In another clip posted by New York Communities for Change, protesters were seen yelling, "Tax the rich," at a passenger who was attempting to enter the airport. Chad is getting triggered that he can't get on his helicopter in East Hampton today, the group tweeted, along with hashtag Occupy the Hamptons. The demonstrators also erected a wooden tripod standing at least 10 feet tall that one of its members sat on until cops pulled her off of it. Who said her group has received tons of support from Hampton's locals as they held a series of protests in the Ritzy Enclave over the past few days. On Friday, New York Communities for Change blockaded the main street of Southampton, and on Saturday, it marched down the Billionaires' Row of the East End. The billionaires and the ultra wealthy are driving rising inequality and emitting a disproportionate amount of emissions, fueling the climate crisis, Who said. The demonstrations come as the Post exclusively reported that workers for the super rich in the Hamptons are being forced to live in tents in the woods due to the area's soaring cost. I work for very rich people in the Hamptons, but I can't afford somewhere to live, Juan Antonio Morales, a Guatemala native who lives behind an abandoned gas station, told the Post. And that sounds absolutely horrible. And the reality is, I mean, this isn't just like an issue basically in the Hamptons. Like, rising living costs is an issue in basically every single state nowadays, right? With the rise of like gas prices, with the rise of basically cost of goods in general, right? Like, personal example, dog food, 30 to 40% more expensive. Like, depending on who you are, depending on how many animals you got, depending on like your responsibilities, your money might get really tight. So I think it's pretty crazy when you really think about it. The main thing to really understand though, like, this doesn't really solve anything. Like, their protest didn't really solve anything. Made it kind of like more of a hassle for the workers that actually worked at that airport, and not to any of the millionaires or billionaires that like just use it. Because you got to keep in mind too, right? If they're really trying to like protest the millionaires and billionaires, basically the billionaires, right? Would a billionaire even care about them? Would the billionaire even spend any amount of time near them? right? Like billionaires operate as such like a crazy aptitude in terms of like lifestyle that like what makes you think that they would go to an airport the normal way, like drive in there? I doubt pretty much any billionaire would actually do that. So let's see if there's any comments. Let's see. Okay, yeah. Man made carbon emissions are 3.5% of total yearly emissions. Decaying leaves make up of 90% of total CO2 emissions. Nothing is broken. The earth is healing itself from the ice age. Man needs to be concerned about waste management throughout the world and give CO2 emissions a rest. I do believe that like waste management is probably like a much bigger issue than like climate change. Because you got to think about it too, right? In terms of like the carbon dioxide. Guess what plants use to create oxygen? Carbon dioxide. Life's losers stage stupid protest. The temperature of Earth has fluctuated a whopping 2 degrees in 200 years. What's the right temperature? Is it when the area we call England was tropical? How about out west, the area known as Sky City, which was once ocean? I like the wizards are smart to answer this instead of having tantrums that disrupt people's lives. When in the history of Earth has the climate not changed? Guess who says abolish the rich? The poor, of course. The poor are too busy working and paying taxes to subsidize them. They aren't saying abolish the rich, they are protesting for a fairer tax code. The last federal tax cut mainly went to the rich. The richest 10% pay 71% of all federal income tax. Please have facts instead of a worthless opinion. Wrong. Incorrect, David. Please get some new material or change the channel. We should abolish the useless. That picture of the old guy in his little safety vest being led away was hilarious. You're 35 years out of date, old man. Let's see. The thing that you gotta really understand, like, really wonder too, right? What do these individuals do in terms of like income that would allow them the free time to go and protest and doing something like this? Like, that's something to think about too. Like, what do you do for work if you do have work, unless you're unemployed, where you have the freedom to go and do something like this, where you have the free time to go and do something like this, right? Because there's a lot of poor people who have no time to do this because guess what? They're probably working multiple jobs to simply make ends meet, right? You have billionaires who are busy making even more billions. You got millionaires probably owning a few businesses. You get upper middle class people tending to work quite a bit and smarter, right? You got middle class individuals who just want to work and basically just enjoy their life after work. So it's like, what are these people doing for like income that would allow them to financially do something like this? It's kind of interesting. If you want to learn how to get out of debt and master your money, so that I guess you, if you do have the free time, you could do something like this. You could financially do something like this because you're debt free and you got money in the bank. But either way, you know, this protest didn't really amount to much.